We've spoken before about the importance of the new development of battery technology as driving some parts of the mining space. Today we're looking at graphite. It is an industrial mineral with an increasing number of uses, including high temperature and electrical conductivity, which lends itself well to where the big demand is today. That's lithium-ion batteries. John Meyer joins us now from SP Angel. How has the dynamic changed around this? I talk about an industrial metal, but it's increasingly become dominated by technology.
And I think it will continue to go in that direction. Clearly, there are a lot of new battery production facilities, manufacturing plants being built in the world. And one of the key ingredients for those batteries is carbon, which will come from graphite and even graphene going forwards. It seems to have a growing importance, and whatever the chemistry of these batteries are going forwards, it's almost certainly going to involve quite a lot of carbon, graphite, and maybe even graphene in the electrodes.
So what is determining the price of graphite? I know it's very difficult to pin down a price for graphite, but what is it that's really driving the price activity at the moment?
Well, we've got underlying growth in the industrial market for graphite anyway. We've got restrictions in production of graphite in China, just because some of those mines are naturally polluting and they are being cut back. And at the same time, we've got growth in demand from the battery manufacturers, who are all looking to ramp up their production in quite some size. So we can see, for example, the battery side of the graphite market going from around 100,000 tonnes a year to nearly 800,000 tonnes a year in the next 8 years. So very consistent growth to come from that, and very sure growth. At the same time, the underlying market for industrial use also rising.
What about the mineral itself? You mentioned graphite and graphene. It comes in different forms, doesn't it, this? And I guess it involves different ways of pulling it out of the ground at different costs.
Every mine is different in the graphite market, and they have different grades of carbon, which is fine. That's fairly easy to understand. But they produce different grades of graphite. So you get small flake, large flake, jumbo flake graphite, and that's to put it quite simply. So the jumbo flake's very good quality material. It gets a great price, maybe $2,500, $3,000 a ton. The small flake graphite is a lot less. It's a fraction of that, maybe $200, $300 a ton. So you've got a big difference in pricing. Most mines will produce quite a lot of small flake, a certain amount of medium flake, and some mines are lucky enough to produce the large flake as well. And you have to be very careful in the processing of this material, because if you process it very gently, then you should be able to get more of the large flake, jumbo size graphite, and that's very useful, and particularly useful for the graphene market.
Graphene, what is graphene compared to graphite? Is it a highly produced refined product, or is graphene readily available out of the ground as it is?
Well, there's not much graphene being produced in the world at the moment. It's difficult to do. And of course the tonnages are less, because when you produce graphene, you're only producing a certain number of layers, of atomic layers of it. So that's very light. But what we're seeing is that it does have huge benefits to electrodes, to concrete, to all sorts of things. So graphene is sure going to become a huge market going forwards. But manufacturers are still struggling, one, to buy the raw material, the graphene, and two, to actually figure out, well, how is it going to work? So we've seen, for example, Tauga Resources are aiming at a market for producing graphene. They're looking to produce 1,000 to 7,000 tonnes of it a year going forwards. But then we see other companies, First Graphene in Australia, for example, also looking to produce products using graphene in intumescent paint. This is fireproof paint, and actually a very important market because it provides extra fire resistance. And I think this is a market that will grow very quickly going forward.
Yeah, I think from your report, I understand that it's sourced in places like Brazil, Mozambique, Madagascar and Tanzania. But you mentioned China. China's a big producer. I think your report suggests that 67% of it is produced in China. And you talk about the environmental concerns. How much of the price is being supported by the fact that China is acknowledging the fact that the environmental issues are a problem and they've cut back production. Is that an issue for the people that are wanting the demand side of it? Is demand far outstripping supply?
It's difficult to see prices in this market because it's such an industrial-led sector, and prices are traded between miner to trader, trader to manufacturer, and those traders, sometimes they're not really traders, they're more like upgraders, so they're taking the material and improving the quality, so they're actually adding value, and that's very important for the end user. But what's going on in China is, yes, some of the graphite that's produced there has other impurities, nasties that you just don't want going into the environment, and those mines are being closed down.
Okay, just want to quickly run past this this share price again for Talga Resources. Just want to bring up the chart if we can to take a look in some more detail about that, and also we'll talk about Walkabout in just a minute. I know something else you wanted to talk about. The Talga Resources, where is it positioned in the market? Is it going to benefit from this increased demand from the technology sector?
Well, Talga have an extraordinary mine in Finland where they cut out literally cathodes of graphite straight out of the ground, and they can use that. But they can also, by connecting electrodes to it, exfoliate graphite off that, which they then use to produce other graphite products. So that's a real business that they have, and it's good quality. But their business model is orientating them more towards battery development and producing the right sort of graphite and carbon for inclusion by battery manufacturers. So I think they're going to add a lot of value to the process there, and they are just lucky enough to have this extraordinary mine with the world's highest grade graphite in it, and it's very, very pure, unlike a lot of other graphite producers that have relatively impure products. Although when we look around the world, we see good quality graphite coming out of Sri Lanka, for example, which is good for producing jumbo flake graphite, which again is particularly good for the graphene market.
If we go back to the share price of Talga Resources, just want to switch quickly onto that, if we can, as well, of Walkabout, which is a very different shape of chart. What's going on at Walkabout Resources, another stock I know you like in the sector? Well,
again, we like Walkabout because it has the ability to produce quite a good proportion of jumbo flake graphite, and of course this is going to be good for the graphene market, and we expect prices there to disconnect from your bog standard carbon. It will definitely be a better quality market. Their project is in Tanzania, and they just received the mining license for that. So that's important going forwards, that they have licenses in place to take them to the next stage so that they can start producing. And Tanzania has been a difficult place for a few years, but it's now getting its act back together again, and companies like Walkabout are able to push forwards.
John, we've got to leave it there, but thanks for joining us. So all about graphite and graphene as it moves from a basic industrial mineral to new technologies.